The French Revolution started in 1789. People of France had seen increasing influence from Europe's Enlightenment and the American Revolution. They compared these ideas to their current lives and saw how unfair France really was. France was divided into 3 estates. The first estate was made up of clergy members. They were exempt from taxes, collected tithes from the poor, and had power in society. The second estate was the nobility. These people owned 30 to 40% of the land and did not pay taxes. The third estate was made up of commoners. These people had a wide range of education and wealth, but most were peasants. Everyone in this estate was heavily taxed by the clergy members of the first estate. French society was based on political inequality. Power imbalance, uneven taxes, and limited rights greatly upset the third estate. To make things worse, France had experienced a recent severe economic depression. Food shortages, inflation, and unemployment made daily life in the third estate feel like a fight for survival. Despite these major problems, the government continued to spend as if nothing was wrong. King Louis XVI brought France into the 7 Years' War and funded the American Revolution. His wife, Marie Antoinette, never wore the same dress twice. Versailles saw the same amount of luxury it ever had. The third estate couldn't believe that they were being ignored. After all, they made up 98% of France's population. Eventually, the government's frivolous spending came to a halt as King Louis realized his financial crisis. He was forced to call the Estates General, a representative assembly that used to meet to solve nationwide issues. Because each estate had one vote in the Estates General, the third estate was usually outvoted by the more privileged groups. So when the third estate members proposed changes that would improve the financial crisis, the king rejected them. He saw that his subjects were being influenced by the Enlightenment and didn't want to be overthrown. The third estate wasn't satisfied. They formed a new group called the National Assembly to write their own constitution. As the news of the organization spread, the people of France began to show their support. In Paris, they attacked the Bastille, an ancient prison and armory, and tore it apart brick by brick. This demonstration was a symbol of tearing apart the king's oppressive rule. The National Assembly finished their first document, the Declaration of Rights of Man, in August of 1789. It protected citizens' freedoms like the Bill of Rights, it granted equal rights like the Enlightenment ideas proposed, and it gave solutions to former injustices and grievances of French society. The king refused to sign the document, so a group of peasants used force until he obliged. As the National Assembly slowly gained power, political demonstrations grew more severe and radical. The Reign of Terror began, a year-long period during which 40,000 French citizens were executed. Following the Reign of Terror, the Directory was created. It was a document that formed a new but no less problematic government. After many ups and downs of the government and the well-being of the people, France slowly grew stable, establishing a free nationalistic government much later in its history. Overall, the French Revolution actually did little to establish peace. What it did do is spread new ideas, disrupt the corrupt social hierarchy that had lasted for centuries, and cause a wave of reforms over the continent and the world. Ukraine gained independence after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, but this is only the beginning of the story. After finally gaining sovereignty, communism swept over the country. Nobody had a voice, but soon people grew discontent with Ukraine's declining economy and extensive involvement with Russian affairs. In 2004, the people's voices were heard. A presidential election was organized to mitigate the problems the country faced. Ukraine endured heavy Russian influence in the east and European influence in the west. The country therefore was divided politically, linguistically, and religiously. Western Ukraine was more modernized and nationalistic due to European influence. These people recognized the Pope as the head of the Roman Catholic Church and spoke Ukrainian. Eastern Ukraine, on the other hand, was conservative. People there were typically part of the Russian Orthodox Church and spoke Russian. After the general election, two individuals emerged as the overall candidates: Viktor Yanukovych, who represented the East, and Viktor Yushchenko, who represented the West. Just when the election seemed as if it couldn't get any more heated, something terrible happened. Viktor Yushchenko, the Eastern candidate, was poisoned. His face was covered in lesions, he suffered extreme abdominal pain, and half of his face became paralyzed. Many people believe that his opponent, Yanukovych, was to blame for the assassination attempt. Yanukovych did more than just poison Yushchenko, though. He also committed election fraud by burning ballots with acid. This allowed him to win by a mere 3%. People were furious. On November 22, 2004, they took to the capital streets, protesting their lack of a voice under the Soviet Union, under Ukraine's communism, and now in the first presidential election. They believed that Yushchenko was the rightful winner. People in the demonstration wore orange, the color of Yushchenko's campaign. After more than a week of protests, Ukraine's Supreme Court declared the election as fraudulent. A runoff election took place later that month, and Yushchenko was declared the winner by a large margin. With Yushchenko as president, the country saw a shift to more nationalistic values. Unfortunately, though, Yushchenko feared that he would antagonize Russia and Western Ukraine if he made too many reforms too quickly. Therefore, Ukraine did not become part of NATO or the European Union, and the country's new values were not solidified. In 2010, Yanukovych finally got his revenge by getting his election win. Although the Orange Revolution didn't cause a permanent change in the government, it did cause a permanent shift in the minds of the Ukrainians. The revolution symbolized the increasing popularity and desire for a democracy. It also confirmed the replacement of Russian ideas with those of the West. In the future, Ukraine will probably see the many ups and downs of the government that France saw. Leaders will rise and be overthrown, opinions will change, but eventually, a stable democratic government will be established. Hopefully, a future leader will have the courage to fight for what he or she believes in, even when Russia tries to stop Ukraine's progress. Although the two revolutions took place centuries apart, they share many similarities. Both the Orange Revolution and the French Revolution were influenced by European values. They both, over time, shifted their country's ideologies from conservative to more nationalistic and liberal. They also both identified and eliminated a corrupt, power-hungry leader that did little to improve the declining economy. The French king, Louis XVI, ignored the needs of his people and limited the power of others to maximize his own glory. The former communist leader of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma, manipulated the political system and limited the freedom of the media to maintain his power. The Western candidate of the election, Viktor Yanukovych, took away the people's voice by tampering with the election results. A main difference between the revolutions is violence. The French Revolution was a bloodbath between the destructive protests and the murders during the Reign of Terror. The Orange Revolution, on the other hand, was non-violent. People simply marched in the streets to make their voices heard. Other than the poisoning of Viktor Yushchenko, the revolution was very civil.